Hello, my name is Kris Cole. Want to talk to you about service learning. I've been an educator for 25 years. I've incorporated service learning into several different curriculums and several different programs. And I've been approached several times over the course of my career, asked to explain how we've incorporated the service learning into different programs that I've built. So I'm going to record this video and share it with everybody so that you can get some ideas and see step by step how to build service learning into your curriculum as well. And it should give you some good ideas as to ways to incorporate it into your subject matter. Some of the projects we've been involved with, I've actually had students go out and put out fires on campus. So we extinguished fires on campus. I'll talk about how we did that and why that's service learning. We've conducted several species surveys, including searching for sea turtles, baby sea turtles out at Canaveral National Seashore. I'll talk about how we accomplished that. The students actually brought wolves, tigers, and bears onto campus. We didn't actually bring them, but we invited an organization to come out and bring those animals onto campus and educate the entire campus about the importance of endangered species and the impact that humans are having on the environment. We loaded the students up into airboats and took them out on Lake Jesup and planted Florida native plants into the water to help remove the excess plant nutrients to help mitigate the impacts of eutrophication on Lake Jesup. My students have testified before both the Florida House of Representatives and the Florida Senate. I'll talk about how service learning resulted in the students actually testifying before those committees. I'll take you through step by step as to how to build a service learning program with important things like funding. I'll talk to you about how we got funding and some ideas as to ways you can find funding. I'll share several case studies of projects we've worked on, and I'll share with you the academic results. That might be one of the most important pieces of service learning, is demonstrating that academic learning is occurring, because that's important for funding. When you're going for those grants to pay for service learning, you need to be able to demonstrate that the students are actually getting the job done in the classroom, especially your at-risk population. I'll share the at-risk numbers with you, and I think you'll be impressed. So kick back, enjoy, and hopefully you'll come up with some ideas of ways you can incorporate service learning into your curriculum. Thank you for your time. This is pretty obvious in anything that you do, but you need administrative buy-in. If you don't have administrative buy-in, there's no way you can have a successful service learning program. Most of these programs involve at least a little bit of risk when you take students out into the field on field trips or leave campus. So you're going to need an administrator to sign off on the risk and help you mitigate the risk. You're also going to need the administrator to approve field trips and help you get buy-in from other teachers. So administrative support is incredibly important. I was blessed in that I had the very, very best administrator in the entire United States. She was actually teacher of the year for the state of Florida when she was a teacher, and she was just that good as an administrator as well. Her name was Karen Coleman. You can see her pictured on the left. But when I took over the program at Winter Springs High School, she had already built the infrastructure for me. So having administrative buy-in, and she taught me that, is one of the very most important things you can have. Step two is very important as well, and it's very obvious. You're going to need funding. You're going to need funding for supplies, for tools. If you're doing field trips, you're going to need it for buses. You're going to need it for paying for substitutes. You're going to need it for any in-services that you and any other teachers involved are going to attend. I received funding from a Learn and Serve grant that Karen Coleman secured the first year I was there. I secured 2 additional Learn and Serve grants. I've also received funding from the SAC, or School Advisory Committee. I've received funding from PTSA. I remember earning a mini grant from the school board. School boards often give out mini grants. Make sure you apply for those. There's lots of places that you can find funding. Each of these steps that I'm talking about has a separate video recorded and attached to it. So feel free, if you need additional funding sources or ideas, to click on the link and go to my video about funding service learning programs. If you're an administrator building a service learning program, you've got to have the right teacher. You need teacher buy-in. You either need to hire the correct teacher or assign the correct teacher that duty. You need a teacher who is both a leader and can be a follower. A teacher who can use direct instruction to teach the students the curriculum they need to know, but who can also yield control to the students when appropriate and yield control to the experts that you bring into the classroom when appropriate. And somebody who can take back control instantly when the situation warrants. So if there's a safety situation or a school violation of some sort, that teacher can step right back into being the person in charge. So you need somebody who's capable of being flexible and moving from role to role very quickly, sometimes several times over the course of a period or a day. That's the teacher you're looking for. Somebody who the kids respect, who gets along with the kids, who is approachable, who can take control when necessary, but also run a democratic classroom. I used to tell the students all the time that I'm a benevolent dictator, or that I run a democratic classroom and I retain veto power. So that's the teacher you're looking for. So you need teacher buy-in. You need the appropriate person to yield to the experts when necessary. Give you an example. We had a program I'm going to talk about called CERT. With CERT, Community Emergency Response Training, we actually went out and put out fires. The firefighters supervised us as they lit fires, and then we used a fire extinguisher to put the fire out. I've never put out a fire in my life, so I had to yield the control of the class to the experts who were the first responders. And I was learning right alongside the students. You need a lifelong learner who is capable and willing to learn right alongside the students and make mistakes in front of them and show the students it's okay to make mistakes, but who can take back control of the class immediately if appropriate. That's the person you're looking for. As I mentioned a minute ago, each of these slides, each of these steps has a separate video recorded that goes much further in depth. So click on those links if you need to go in further depth. You need student buy-in. You need to have a teacher who commands the respect of the students and is willing to turn control of the classroom over to them as far as decision making. Obviously, the teacher is still in charge. I always used to tell the students that I had veto power. But if you really want true service learning to occur, it needs to be student driven and sometimes student led. And in order to do that, you need to have a democratic type classroom, but one where there's still control as far as the teacher keeping things safe. So you need a teacher who can take a back seat and treat the students like equals, but who can also maintain control when necessary. And you need to include the students in the decision making. And if you do that, you get a very, very powerful, meaningful relationship between the teacher, the students, and they will drive things and achieve accomplishments that you can't even fathom. It's incredible the things they'll do if you hand control of the class over to the students and allow them to share their ideas and gifts. The teacher needs to be able to transition from expert to facilitator, to be able to take a back seat to the experts and to learn alongside the students. Then the teacher needs to be able to transition back and forth, sometimes within minutes of each other. If a student is misbehaving, obviously you need to reassume control of the class, but you need to be able to also learn alongside the student. So it's sometimes can be a little tricky, but you need a teacher who can be flexible and adapt to a scenario where you're moving in and out of that role, sometimes several times in an hour. So let's go into a little bit of depth about several projects that we've worked on. The first one is Lake Jesup. When I took over the program at Winter Springs High School, Karen Coleman had secured funding, built infrastructure. She and I met over the summer several times and built the curriculum as to what we were going to be teaching. And I invited St. Johns River Water Management District, their scientists, in to speak with the students and share ideas with the students. They talked about eutrophication, the problems occurring in Lake Jesup, and asked the students to be involved with some of the solutions. And the students and the scientists often brainstormed on different things they could do. So we took the students out in boats. We took them out in airboats, as you can see. And on that day we took them out on the airboats, we actually were planting native plants into the water to help remove the excess nutrients from the water to help purify the lake. You can also see a couple of newspaper articles. One of the newspaper articles there is the students were out stenciling at storm drains, do not dump drains to the lake, to educate the public that anything that the public pours on the street ends up in the lakes eventually. So these are all things that we did that were service learning ideas. We took them out in boats. We took them out, when we took them out in the boats, we did water quality testing. We took them out in airboats and we planted plants to help purify the lake. We did a stenciling project to educate the public, and all these were um, one project. They were the Lake Jesup project, and a lot of the funding came from Learn and Serve, and St. John's River Water Management provided in-kind matches with the boats and the scientists. So really cool stuff. And this is one of the projects that my students really had a lot of fun doing. Another organization we did a lot of work with was Seminole County Natural Lands. I would bring in their land management expert to talk to the students as a scientist. He would talk to them about biodiversity, species richness, native versus non-native species, the problems that non-native species create for our native species. And then we would go out and check the land to see if their management techniques were working, to find out if they needed to do more burning, to find out what they needed to do to get the species that they wanted. And so we would take students out the day before. I'd pick 3 or 4 students. We would go out the day before, put out box traps, bait them, put in cotton and different things for the little mice in case they get caught. And then we would take the entire class back the next day. We would check those box traps. We would check cover boards. We would check pit traps, and we would do some seining. And then we would take that data and share it with the scientists and find out if the management techniques they were using were working the way they thought they were. So again, more service learning, great experience for the students. They learned a lot and providing valuable data for the county to make decisions on. One of the requirements for the Learn and Serve grant was to go to the Service for Environmental Action Learning Service conference, the SEALS conference. And that was a 2-night, 2 overnight field trip, which was a lot of fun. And on this particular field trip, you can see the students, my students were teaching students from other schools how to do an aquatic species survey on the local river. So when you get funding, a lot of times these grants will come with some perks, like going to the SEALS conference, that sort of thing. Once you develop a successful service learning program, people will come to you. They will find you with serving the service learning opportunities. After the 1998 tornadoes wrecked what was locally known as the Mud Walk, Seminole County Public Schools takes their, I think it's the second graders or one of the elementary school grades, they take them on a walk through the mud and teach them about what mud's made out of in Florida wetlands, hydrocamics. And after the tornadoes came through in 1998, they laid waste to several trees that blocked the mud walk. So the environmental center reached out to my students and asked them if they'd come out and help remove some of the trees. So we actually took a day and did the mud walk ourselves and started removing trees and clearing all of the debris from the tornadoes. So a great opportunity for both my students and the elementary students to learn from this particular issue. Once you have a successful service learning program going, the students will drive it, they'll even lead it. In this particular picture, you can see the students instigated, drove, and led a phone book recycling drive for the high school. They actually spoke with their classmates, had everyone bring in their phone books back when we had phone books, and recycled them. They did the same thing with socks. So the students will, once they buy in, they will drive, lead, they'll pretty much do everything. You just need to sign off and supervise them. Once you build it, they will come. Once you build an effective service learning program for your classroom, it can become school-wide. Here's an example of where my students wanted to make Earth Day, we changed it to Earth Week and we made it a school-wide event where every morning on the announcements, we asked some trivia questions about the Earth, the environment, sustainability, things like that. And anyone who answered the questions right earned a ticket to come to the presentation that Friday. So we had a lot of participation from students who were not in my class. Also, that drives your enrollment for future classes because they think it's fun and cool and want to be a part of it. Well, what we did is we brought in an organization. It was called the Amazing Animals Affection Training Organization, and they specialize in endangered species. They brought in a wolf cub, a tiger cub, a chimp, some lemurs, I believe it was a baby Kodiak bear or something. And we had all sorts of animals, and the students were invited to the auditorium. We ended up inviting 24 classes, and we ended up inviting the students who won their contest on the morning announcements and won tickets. And it's a great way to get your entire school on board with what you're trying to do, which is educate, in my case, about the environment. So we took our class-wide service learning and turned it into school-wide service learning. And this wasn't the first time we did that. I'll talk about some other situations where it snowballed into not only school-wide, but in one case, worldwide. So this is an example of how you can take it to the next level. Just like we did with Seminole County Natural Lands, we actually had a conversation with Canaveral National Seashore, met up with their scientists, went out and did a sea turtle nest survey, and actually did some seining in the intercoastal waterway. So another opportunity to do a species survey and share our results with the scientists that we worked with. So we know that service learning leads to a lot of fun, great relationships between the teachers and the students, great relationships between the teachers, students, and the community, a lot of positive philanthropic type activities. So whether it's environmental, Relay for Life, or any other philanthropic activities, you get meaningful learning, you get engagement, you get student leadership showing up. All sorts of different things go into this that make it great. But what about the academic results? Let's take a look at them. This is from my first year of teaching. The students involved with my program attended school 2 more days than the average student, achieved a 0.34 GPA higher than the typical winter spring student. 75% of the at-risk students achieved a 2.0 or higher GPA by the end of the year. 100% of them graduated. And while that's all fine and dandy, and those are great statistics, let's talk about the most important thing, which is what did they do after they graduated? Several became doctors. I've got nurses, first responders, social media coordinators, insurance agents. They're all contributing to society in some positive manner. My at-risk students, the 3 that I'm referring to, one is now a U.S. Marshal, another one runs a lawn care company, and the third one is a construction manager. Incredible people. Some of my high achievers, 2 of them are now chief of staff for publicly traded companies. Again, when you talk about the things these students accomplished, and again, this was the year after being involved as far as the academic results and further on later in life as I followed their careers, because you build such incredible relationships and such strong relationships that they connect with you outside of school when they graduate. So it's a powerful lifelong friendship that you develop with these students. So it's not just the philanthropic piece that is awesome, but the achievements that these students accomplish are incredible. Now, it's important that you save your data. When you're going for grants, when you're asking for funding, when you have these statistics to share, it definitely increases your chances of getting the funding you're looking for. So it's important that you share these things and that you save this data. The first year, everything we just talked about occurred during the first year of teaching and continued on for a couple of years. Students were allowed to take me for 4 different classes. They could take me for Environmental Technology 1, Environmental Technology 2, Water Quality Testing, and then AP Environmental Science. So students could take me for up to 4 years. At the end of year three, they could actually take a test with one of the local community colleges and earn college credit if they passed the test. It was actually a project they had to put together, and then they would interview with a college professor to receive their credit. So that was our first year. The second year, we decided that we wanted to create a hybrid school within a school model. Basically, what we did is I selected an English teacher, and she would teach seventh period, and I would teach sixth period. And then if we wanted to block the two classes together, we had the same students for both classes. So we were able to create a 2-hour block and add additional programs to what we were trying to achieve. So students could still take me for 4 classes, but now if they got to that second or third year, they could take me for a block as well, with the team teaching of an English teacher. So we implemented that at Winter Springs High School. Then after I left Winter Springs, became an assistant principal for a year, found I didn't like all the paperwork involved with it, went back to the classroom, and most importantly, I missed the kids. So I went over to Seminole High School, and while we've not done that, the students, what I've done to build those relationships is we've created a club called the Seminole High School Wildlife Conservation Club, which is where I can have students and have a long-term relationship with them to help them develop the skills and implement service learning that way. The students who are taking me, they can actually, I guess, theoretically take me for 2 years. They can take me for Florida ecology and for AP environmental science. And we also use lunchtime to have some meetings. So we have meetings for our club at lunchtime. We have them after school. And a lot of times, and we'll talk about my most impressive project in a little while, the Scrub Jay project. Students will actually come into my class during lunch, and we will video conference in decision makers, whether it's nonprofits, um, legislators, or other decision makers to discuss some of the current environmental legislation going on. So that's what we're doing since I don't have that school within a school infrastructure where I am currently. We're using the club instead. And it's worked very, very effectively. And we'll talk about how that's been the greatest project that I've accomplished so far. Selecting the correct teacher to team up with if you decide you want to create a modified school within a school is critical. I was very, very lucky. We were coming back from a field trip from the first year of teaching. I saw a bunch of students sword fighting in the courtyard. I walked up to the students and I asked them, "What are you doing?" They told me they were reenacting Shakespeare. I thought to myself, I can work with a teacher like that. I asked them who their teacher was. They told me Mrs. Dixon. So I walked up and introduced myself to Mrs. Dixon and said, "Hey, would you be amenable to doing some team teaching?" She said, "Sure." I asked her, "What's your next unit?" She said, "Well, they're doing a letter writing unit." And so I went home, read through some magazines, and found a project that we could work on together on a letter writing unit. And that actually eventually became probably my most successful of all the service learning projects I've ever been involved with, the Scrub Jay project. And that's one of the last things I'm going to talk to you about is this project actually became believe it or not, I can't believe I'm saying this, a worldwide issue. It was obviously became a huge issue in the state of Florida. It's been covered nationally a little bit, and it even was broadcast worldwide one time. And I'll talk to you about how we got there, what it was. But essentially, it started as a letter writing unit with a teacher because I wanted something to write a letter about. So again, the things you can accomplish when you work as a team and have the right person. You need a team teach with the right person that fits your personality. We structured it so she had the classes either sixth or seventh, and I had them for the other. And then if one of us wanted to block the students together, we could do that. And the rest is history. All right, and we get to case study number 9, the letter writing unit. So I talked about team teaching with Catherine Dixon and she wanted to do a letter writing unit. I went home, found an article about the Audubon Society trying to change the state bird to the Florida scrub jay. they had made an attempt. It lost momentum, essentially for all intents and purposes. They were getting ready to pack it in. So I had the students write letters. I didn't care if they were for scrub jays or against scrub jays, but 153 were for, 3 were against. We sent the letters in. It led to us meeting with senators, representatives. The kids testified before the Senate. They testified before the House of Representatives. They met with the governor's aides. They were covered on every news channel in Florida. They were covered in every newspaper in Florida. You can see the Orlando Sentinel front page. You know you've made it when you've been the subject of a political cartoon. Then it became a nationwide issue. It's actually been covered. John Oliver referenced it on HBO. Um, the NPR, This American Life, covered it not only for the nation, but for the world. This was a letter writing unit that actually made it a worldwide impact. So when you combine with the right teacher on service learning, you never know just how far it's going to go and what it's going to accomplish for the kids. Currently, we've been working on this project for 24 years, and the students are now, during lunchtime, they'll set up video conferences with state senators, state representatives, decision makers, nonprofits, lawyers, lobbyists. That's what my lunch in my classroom typically involves. Students hopping on a conference call with some decision maker, someplace or another. And they've also, like I said, testified and debated with some of the key decision makers for the state. So when you combine with the right other teacher, set up a structure where you can do some team teaching, potentially combine classes and keep the same students so you can block off some time, you can accomplish some incredible things. Case study number 10, CERT, Community Emergency Response Team Training. We were the second school in the nation and first school in Florida to implement CERT into the curriculum. So we integrated CERT into the curriculum. This was very student driven. Actually, it was 100% student driven initially. The students came to me and said, we want to be first responders. Several of the students told me that. And can you incorporate that into the curriculum? So I reached out to some first responders. They suggested we do CERT. CERT is a 14-hour course. I believe it's 7 2-hour chunks, and you learn everything from triaging to hurricane preparation to other disaster relief to putting out fires. You actually put out a fire. You can see that in the picture on the left. So we incorporated this. We were able to do it because every other Friday we would block off 2 hours. On Thursday, I would give the English teacher 2 hours so that the students didn't fall behind. And on Friday, that English teacher teamed up with me and we went and learned CERT along with the students. So very, very powerful lesson for the students in that their teachers demonstrated being lifelong learners and learned right alongside of them. Again, this is where you have to have the ability to let the expert take over the class and you learn along with the students. So really cool opportunity. If you get the opportunity to incorporate CERT into your school, it's something you might want to think about as far as service learning. And here in Florida, we get hurricanes all the time. I know my students are prepared. So you've heard story after story. I've given you 11 case studies to think about, possibly give you some ideas as to things you might be able to incorporate into your curriculum. I can go on and on. We've done dozens more service learning projects than the things I just listed. What I've just listed are things I did in the first 3 years when I was building the program at Winter Springs. Some other things I've not talked about that you can incorporate: visiting elementary schools. I had my high school students go out to elementary schools and teach the younger kids how to read, especially at that risk population in some of the lower socioeconomic schools. Tutoring at-risk students, the same thing. We used environmental themes to get those students to learn about scrub jays and different things, but we were incorporating reading in the process. Visiting middle schools, one of the things that my students used to do is go out on Earth Day and take some of the animals from our classroom. We have a Florida king snake and some turtles and newts they would take and talk about at different middle schools when they were conducting Earth Day presentations. Um, we talked about with the Scrub Jay, they testified before the Senate and the House of Florida. One of the things I've not talked about is paid internships. In our third year, I actually reached out to the county and we created a program where my students would receive paid internships doing environmental jobs around Central Florida. And some of those kids were hired on year after year. So those are some of the things to give you some ideas. What's really cool is when you get established and people start coming to you. And let me talk about that. On my next slide is a really, really big one. You're going to recognize the person on the next slide. This is really cool. You are correct. That is Dr. Jane Goodall, one of the foremost experts in the world on primate behavior. She actually reached out to us to meet with the students and talk to them about her Roots and Shoots program. So during our third year, we had built up enough of a reputation that people were coming to us. We had the community coming to us for projects, schools coming to us for projects, even celebrities like Dr. Jane Goodall coming to us and asking us to assist them with projects. She's not the only environmental hero in these slides. Standing next to her in one of the slides is Chris Bird. He was a former student of mine, and he met Jane Goodall when he was in high school as one of my students. He eventually became a lawyer. He was the employee by the state of Florida who was fired for using the term global climate change. He himself, in his own right, is an environmental hero, and he and Dr. Goodall stayed good friends for the rest of his life. Eventually, he passed. He lost his battle with cancer, but they remained lifelong good friends for a long time. I know she flew out to see him when he was very sick right before he passed. So there is no limit to what you can grow these things into. If you follow the steps I mentioned, if you get the student buy-in, if you get the administration buy-in, if you get school buy-in, if you get community buy-in, there's no limit as to what you can turn these programs into. And it's a wonderful thing to watch as you really don't know what direction you're going to go in the end if you're student driven. The students will drive things, and you just never know when you're going to end up teaming up with someone like Dr. Jane Goodall, because that's where your path takes you. Thank you for watching this presentation and sticking with me this far. Hopefully, you've gotten some good ideas as to things you can incorporate into your curriculum in your school. Some best practices for you. Make sure your administrators are on board. Keep them in the loop. Let them know upsides and downsides of different things, especially if there's any risks involved. If you use social media, teach and emphasize internet safety, especially if you're doing anything where you're interacting with the public. Get permission forms signed for field trips and for anybody involved with anything that involves social media. Keep the parents involved to keep them informed of anything that you're doing. And understand that if you do any correspondence with members of the legislature, they become public records. So if you decide to do something like our campaign to change the state bird to the Florida scrub jay, understand anything you send over to your legislators becomes public record and anybody can access it. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to drop comments below and I'll share you my expertise, the mistakes I've made along the way and the things I've done correctly. Again, thank you for your time. Good luck with your service learning project. And if there's anything I can do to assist you, drop comments below. Feel free to contact me. It's a worthwhile endeavor. You'll get student buy-in. It'll create very meaningful learning, and it will create a relationship between you and your students for the rest of your lives. You will become a mentor. A lot of my students tell me I'm not just a teacher, but I'm a life coach. And they'll reach out to me. I've been in contact with these kids, some of them for 25 years now. They'll reach out to me about all sorts of different issues where I can help them not only with their environmental issues, but anything that involves expertise that they need help with or even good advice. You will develop a lifelong friendship with these students and have impact. This is a very, very powerful, impactful endeavor you're getting ready to start. So enjoy. Thanks for your time.